Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Tico Hall here at the Tampa Bay History Center. My name is Fred Hearns. I'm the Curator of Black History here at the History Center. Thank you. Thank you. Listen, this is really a team effort, and just want to mention our president and Frank Duckwall, President and CEO of the Tampa Bay History Center, C.J. Roberts, who helps to make all of this happen, Nancy Dallance, our Director of Education, who you met at the front door, and so many other people on our staff and our wonderful volunteers, many of whom are here during the day as guests come in, and they are very hospitable, very welcoming, and they still find time to come to these programs. So I want to thank you all who are volunteers who are here this evening, as well as members of the public, those who are watching online. And by the way, this program is going to be taped, so it'll be up on our website in another week or so you'll be able to see it again and maybe share it with folk who were not able to be here. We are expecting some other guests who are going to be arriving, and make yourselves at home. We're going to be here for the next hour and 15 minutes, somewhere around there. After the program, which will be approximately 60 minutes, we'll have time for Q&A. And those of you who are online, you can also submit your questions, and we'll try to share them with our panel. And we do have a panel of experts this evening. Let me say, first of all, welcome to Florida Conversations. This is a free and accessible event for the public, both in person and streamed live on Zoom. We're delighted to have you here with us. We would like to extend our thanks to our generous sponsors for making this program possible. First of all, USF Libraries, WUSF Public Media, and AARP Tampa Bay. Additional sponsor support is graciously provided by Shelley Blood. And Shelley here tonight, I don't know if she's here this evening, but Shelley does a wonderful job with us in so many areas. Please note that full-length recordings of today's program will be available on the Tampa Bay History Center's YouTube channel. We're happy to take questions at the end of the program. For our audience here in Tico Hall, we remind you to wait for the microphone before asking a question when we get to that portion of the evening during the Q&A session. Please wait for the microphone so that we can record your question. And for our audience on Zoom, please use the Q&A feature in the Zoom webinar app to submit your questions during the presentation. The Zoom webinar app to submit your questions. Thank you and enjoy the program. Now, I'd like to say also, we do have a display table. You passed it as you were coming in. Some of you stopped and picked up brochures at the table, and I'm going to ask you, if you didn't have an opportunity to do so coming in, please do so before you leave. We have several things of interest from our guests with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, as well as from the City of Tampa Human Rights Office. And you also have some literature in your chairs, as well as on the display table at the entrance, that tell you about some of the things that we're doing here at the Tampa Bay History Center. So bless you. So for this spring, this is the final program here on June 6th, the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And we've had some excellent programs this year since January 10th. How many of you have been to at least one of our other Florida Conversations? Great, 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 excellent. So we hope that you will continue to do so, and we see much value in these programs. And I also learn a lot every time that I'm involved in one. We'd like to mention that we do have membership brochures at the table at the entrance. We're asking you to consider becoming a member of the Tampa Bay History Center. We appreciate your support. And we have a few other flyers, just two others that I'll mention. As you all know, Juneteenth is a federal holiday, and we're going to be celebrating Juneteenth for the first time here at the Tampa Bay History Center. It will not be in this building. It will be at our newest venture outside of this building, which is in the Encore Public Housing Development. It's called St. James at Encore, 1202 North Governor Street. And that's going to be on June 19th, Juneteenth, which is a Wednesday. And we do have flyers, I think, in the chairs, as well as maybe a few at the entrance. So please consider supporting that. And the last thing I'll mention this month also, on June 24th, will be our latest edition of our Black History Book Club. So we started the book club in February with Up From Slavery by Booker T. Washington. In April, we discussed The Miseducation of the Negro by Dr. Carter G. Woodson. And on June 24th, In Peace and Freedom, My Journey in Selma by Reverend Dr. Bernard Lafayette, Jr. This is what those flyers look like with that information and the address and the date and the time of the book clubs. Of course, these are free and open to the public, and we welcome you all to come and join us. So with that, let me just say that I'm very pleased to have a distinguished panel with us here this evening. These people are public servants who often work in the background, and we may not know their names as household names, but believe me, their contributions to this community is tremendous. We want to, first of all, welcome Tamra Schweiberger. She is director of the Tampa Field Office of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Ms. Schweiberger, give her a hand, please. Next, Naomi Candelaria. Naomi is the interim supervisor for the City of Tampa Office of Human Rights. Naomi. And we also have with us this evening Mr. William Bastian. He is the Outreach and Education Coordinator for the Tampa Field Office of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, better known as EEOC. William? So with that, I'm going to take my seat at the desk, and give me just a second, and I will come over and join our panel, and then we'll begin the conversation. Now, many of you know the reason that we're having this celebration. This is the 60th anniversary of the signing of the 1964 Civil Rights Act by President Lyndon B. Johnson, July 2nd, 1964. So we're not quite at that date, but we're rapidly approaching the time when it will actually be 60 years. Now, we know what preceded 1964. We know what happened on November 22nd, 1963. When President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. And some of you also know that he was in Tampa just 4 days prior to that. We may even have some people here who saw the president on that visit. When he came to Tampa on the 18th of November, and we were just so excited to have him here. At that time, his motorcade traveled down what was Grand Central, right? Some of you remember that. Grand Central. Before that, it was Lafayette Street. But it was Grand Central, and after President Kennedy was assassinated, the name of the street was changed to Kennedy Boulevard. And I can remember June of 1966, as a high school student here at Middleton High School, our band played at the dedication ceremony when this beautiful statue of President Kennedy was dedicated right at the entrance to the University of Tampa on Hyde Park Avenue and Kennedy Boulevard. So we loved our president, as did so many other people. And of course, the signing of Title VII was actually televised. It was a big deal. It was a big event. And just hours after Congress approved it, the president signed the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And so now we have 60 years of history. And so that's where we want to start. If we could start with our guests from EEOC, just talking about what this means, the importance of having the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and if you can look back and reflect perhaps at the beginning of your career. We'd also like to know how you got involved in this business and what led you to this point in your professional career and what this celebration of 60 years means to you. So if we could start with Ms. Schweiberger.
Certainly. First, I want to thank Mr. Hearns and the Tampa Bay History Museum for having us here today. It means a lot to commemorate the signing of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. 60 years is a pretty big deal of getting this act in place, and there's been many amendments to it over the years. There's been many changes to it, most recently even last year. So there's still, it's always evolving, it's always changing, depending on, you know, they always improve it. When they first signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964, that's when the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission was created out of that act. So it was an agency, a federal agency that would enforce the laws, the acts that were within the Civil Rights Act. We particularly enforce Title VII, which is it's discrimination in the employment industry. Our mission and our vision is to eliminate and remedy any discrimination in employment. So we work really hard at identifying those charges. People can, no matter who you work for, you can always file a charge. Then we can apply some jurisdictional issues to it and guide you in the right direction. But that is what we do, is we enforce the statutes for Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. So any employment issues, any employment discrimination, you know, we look at that. Okay, and that's what generated our agency, was that act. So we you know, we're very thankful for that act. I think it's helped our community. It's helped, you know, everyone about employment. You know, equal employment for everyone, whether race, sex, age, all of those factors. And we help enforce that. I got into EEO policy and law in the Postal Service, believe it or not. And from there, then I migrated over to the EEOC, and I've been with them now for a while. And it's really been very rewarding to work with them and to help eradicate some of this discrimination we see in the workplace.
Well, thank you for that, and we're going to come back with some more information about EEOC here in Tampa. And Ms. Candelaria, with the City of Tampa, if you can tell us, what does this 60 years mean to you from your perspective with the City of Tampa and the Office of Human Rights?
I believe, Ms. Schweiberger?
Mm-hmm.
Pronunciation's key. Really went in deep regarding the EEOC. So our office, the Tampa Office of Human Rights, was established subsequent to that also. However, we deal with 3 different spaces. So we deal with housing, employment, and any public venues within the City of Tampa. So in that, everything that Ms. Schweiberger said, we enforce here as a FEPA, which is a Fair Employment Practices Agency. So we are the substantial equivalent of the actual federal government conducting an investigation here. We are that arm, I guess you can say. And in the housing space as well, so we are a federal housing assistance program, and in that, we are a substantial equivalent to HUD and their federal guidelines and processes. So what we say here pretty much goes for the federal. They go ahead and enforce that and believe that our investigation is sufficient enough for them to move forward on that. Also with the public accommodation space, that's more of a local ordinance. And so it is the City of Tampa's ordinance that we enforce in that public accommodation space. Regarding the act, so what I wanted to say, and it's beautiful, it's kind of, I love being here because Mr. Hearns is here. And with that being said, in 1959, there was an office in the city of Tampa that had been established called the Biracial Committee, prior to the act even being initiated. And with that, upon the act being initiated, they became a commission on community relations. And that was this interactive group that would help in education, very deeply involved in the community and the people and the needs of the groups that are not deserved, but just weren't looked at so much at that time period. So it evolved, it became this thing, and then Mr. Hearns became a part of this office. In what year, Mr. Hearns?
1975.
In 75. So I actually, prior to coming here, went into like the archives and placed like some documents, a historical perspective as far as like the office, the mission, the creation of it. So if you're really into history, there's a couple of different items on the back table that you could go ahead and look into. So,
And his picture.
and his picture, he's in the picture.
Much younger.
Yes, in 75,
Black
I think
hair.
it was 75, 76. Black hair, the mustache, you could tell. But with that being said, you know, the act in Tampa and just the diversity was already kind of there, the idea that people needed a space. So I love that we're here, Mr. Hearns does and facilitates these things. And regarding myself, and we'll go a little deeper into the office and the specifics to how cases get done and things like that. But personally, when I came out of college, I was very much a power to the people kind of vibe, and I became an advocate in housing spaces. So to me, housing was more personal. More personal. Employment is personal, but housing to me, because then education and other things stem from that, right? So with that being said, I was an advocate out of college, went ahead and worked as a counselor for HUD with Section 8 for about 3-4 years, then tapped into the legal. I was the little kid that always said, I'm gonna be a lawyer when I grow up, I'm gonna be a lawyer. And so then eventually I ended up going to law school, getting my JD, and finding out that there was an Office of Human Rights here in the city of Tampa. And when I found that out, I was applying. And so with that being said, I've been here for 4+ years. I am currently, I had been an investigator, that was my initial role, and now I am the interim supervisor in the office, which happened fairly recently. So that's my track. I'm very passionate for people, equality, for all persons. And fun fact, the highest reported or the biggest issue is disability discrimination nationally, just so you know. So it's not necessarily race being the big issue, it's the accessibility of people who don't necessarily, or you may be overlooked in that way. So, thank you.
Well, thank you for that overview, and we're going to get deeper into that because with the federal and the city levels of investigation, while they do similar work, there are differences. You're going to learn a little more about those differences and the rights that people have under the federal law as well as the city ordinance. Many people have no idea there's even a city ordinance. And let me tell you, it was a long journey to get that city ordinance approved by council and the mayor. This was many years ago, but we're going to get into that a little bit more. So that was great. And Mr. Bastian, who is Outreach Education Coordinator for EEOC, and tell us how you get involved in this work and what this 60th anniversary means to you.
Well, my background was military. I spent 23 years on active duty, Army, and I retired out of Tennessee, the 101st Airborne Division. And after retiring from the military, I did some contracting work where I helped soldiers transition from the military into the civilian sector. So one thing that I realized is that I really love helping people out. I love helping people in need, and I wanted to work for an organization where my values matches their values. And I thought with the EEOC, it was a perfect match because I get to have an immediate impact on other people. As far as this 60th anniversary, I believe this is an extraordinary milestone in our history. You know, growing up as a kid, you know, we didn't see Black principals, we didn't see Black CEOs, we didn't see women in CEO positions. And I think what this done, the Civil Rights Act, what it's done, it's opened position and opportunities for not just one race, but for all races. And to me, that means a lot. I have kids that I can now tell, hey, you could be the president and really mean it of the United States one day, right? I can tell my daughter that. I can tell my son that, because what this has done, not just for my children, but for your children as well.
Well, thank you for that overview, and I think it's great that you have, you come from different spaces, but you wind up sort of in the same arena where you are protecting the rights of citizens of this country. And Ms. Schweiberger, let me get a little more into the details exactly how this system works. So someone believes that they are the victim of job discrimination. Maybe they've been terminated unfairly, and they think that it was because of their race, or because they're a woman, or because they're over 40 years old, or because they have a disability, and any other protected category. And how do they contact your office, and what should they do, and then what happens when they do contact your office?
We have a website, eeoc.gov, and they have a a portal on there where you can, I was a nurse too at one point, so, you know,
Many
I
lives.
interchange my lingo. So, but the employee can go onto that portal and log in their allegation of discrimination. And it does have to be based on, you have to be alleging discrimination based on one of our protected purviews. So it can be based on race, sex, age, over 40 only, religion, national origin, sexual orientation. It can be based on retaliation. You can be retaliated against. So those are some of the, bases, we call them, of discrimination. So if you go in there and say, I've been discriminated against because somebody doesn't like me, that's not enough. It has to be based on one of those bases of discrimination. That's what we protect, okay? And we investigate that. So you go in there and you enter that information. We call you, we get you scheduled for an interview, we interview you, and we get the details of that allegation. At that point, then we can, one of two things. We can accept it for investigation, or we can say that, we're not going to investigate this. We're going to give you a notice of right to sue, which means that you can sue in court based on the information that we give you. So we actually support and enforce the laws, federal laws, not your state and local laws, but the federal laws. So they can be very different. And we do base that on the Civil Rights Act, Title VII, okay? We also enforce the Age Discrimination Act, okay? And we enforce the American with Disabilities Act. So they amended that. To be disabled, you have to be a qualified individual within the definition of the act. And they amended that, I think it was in 2008, and basically it covers a very, very broad disability. I mean, it can cover
Range.
physical disability, mental disability, internal organs. It can cover, if I've had cancer but it's in remission, it's still covered as a disability. So it's a very, very broad category. So we do cover that as well as one of the bases as a disability. So once you do that, then we will do a full investigation. If we elect to go ahead and investigate that charge, we talk to your employer. We get we get witnesses. We do a full investigation, and then we do litigate cases. We have a legal team that will litigate cases if they feel like it is a litigation opportunity for us. We've had several noteworthy decisions, Supreme Court decisions for the EEOC that have changed laws, and they've been, very, very beneficial. So we have a very good relationship with we are very neutral, though. You're not gonna, we're not on the employee side or the employer side. We will do a fair investigation. So, and we'll be honest with, you as an employee who's filed that, hey, listen, the evidence is not supporting your charge, or yes, the evidence does support your charge. So, we do walk that fine line as well.
Well, thank you. So let me ask a couple of follow-up questions. If there is a statute of limitations, if there is, what is it? How long does a person have to file a complaint from the time they feel their rights were violated? And I know there's no typical investigation. Each case is different. But can you give me some idea of the length of an investigation, maybe an average case? How long does it take for it to be resolved?
Sure. The statute of limitations is 300 days. So from the date of violation that you feel you've had a violation, you have 300 days to contact us to file a charge. So it's 300 days. Now, with the state, the Florida Commission, which is another FIPA, but it's a state FIPA, you have 360 days. So if you miss the statute of limitations with us, you can always file with FCHR, which is the Florida Commission of Human Rights, and they have up to 360 days. Once we accept your case for an investigation, it varies. The time frame varies depending on the complexity of what we find on the investigation. It could take 180 days, or it could take, 500 days. So it could take a long time, and if we do litigate it, it does add time to that as well. So it depends on where that charge goes, where that case goes, where the investigation takes us. And like I said, we also, not only do we litigate cases, but we also mediate cases. We have a mediation team that will mediate your case with your employer and hopefully get a resolution that way as well.
Well, thank you. That's valuable information. And I know earlier we were talking, Ms. Candelaria, about dual filing and the difference between a complaint file with the city Human Rights Office and how you dual file. And I'm glad you mentioned the Florida Commission also. So can you tell me about the city's relationship with the Florida Commission and dual filing and how that works?
So us as a municipality, the city, work under an ordinance and the federal act. So we don't necessarily play to Florida. Florida Commission, however, has Florida statutes and different things that they have in place that they work with when they investigate cases. Now, dual filing is considered, since we are this substantial equivalent, that we are doing this on our own accord for the local city of Tampa as well as for EEOC. So if EEOC were to have investigated or concluded or whatever, we still have jurisdiction over this case as well. So as far as relationships, we do communicate with each other regarding different cases, different questions, opportunities, outreach, engaging with each other, potential like pattern and practice type things where one particular employer or one particular housing provider seems to be doing something repetitively. So now we got to escalate this and see how big this net actually goes, that now that we see all these other things arising, which kind of goes to what she had just said regarding the investigation timeframes and lengths. So it's dependent generally, but our office locally has regarding EEO, so employment, just employment and public venues, within 180 days, right, of the act, the most recent act or offense. In our housing space, it's a full year. So from the date of the actual perceived offense to a year later, you can actually, that is your statute of limitations. You can, within that time frame, you can file. If it's outside of that, you cannot. Then we would say, okay, we can't take it here, but we could direct you to EEO because they have that 300, or the Florida Commission if you need more time than that. So people have options. However, locally, that's our jurisdiction or our statute of limitations. In housing spaces, so regarding investigations, I don't want to belabor like EEOC, because basically we mirror exactly what she was saying. However, we employ the mediation technique early, up front. So regarding our employment cases, we try to get the people up front to say, hey, I'm willing to talk. I'm willing to talk and I'm willing to settle this. Let's have a mediation. So I happen to be a Circuit Civil Certified Mediator as well. We have one that's about to be in the office as well, and our previous supervisor. So most of us try to have that certification in-house to be able to do that work while we're here instead of having to take it outside. Funding, you know, all those things, right? So with that said, the housing complaint and public accommodations, very similar. We have an intake, you call, email, a letter, you come to the office, you make your complaint. If it covers or if it hits the jurisdictional requirements, which means it has to be of a particular time frame, like we were saying, it has to be within the city limits for our office specifically. So the time frame, the actual place, so housing, that it has to be a protected. So with there are exemptions for people and their protections too in that. But as long as we know that this is a multifamily and they're renting more than 3 homes or 3 properties, then you are 100% covered by the act. If you are using a real estate agent, that property is covered by the act as well. Now, if it's a one-time owner of one property, not necessarily covered by the act. So if you are in the business of renting or providing housing, it's covered, and we can initiate a claim. With that, the inquiry, same process. From that, if it meets those elements or requirements, we then proceed, and then we would then go to an investigation. So the complaint would be filed and drafted. We mail it to all parties. Hey, you've got 10 days to respond. Within those 10 days, they provide a position statement. They say, hey, it's not what they say it is. And we read that documentation, and they provide exhibits to support what they're saying. If, in fact, that looks good, we evaluate the information to see what else we would need, right? And in that, witnesses, interviews, all of the things. So it encompasses the same thing. We, in housing spaces, conciliate, which is a less formal type of mediation. So we are to concurrently investigate and conciliate and have these discussions. Hey, are you willing to settle? This is what it's looking like. Da-da-da-da-da. Are you sure? You know, and so we have these conversations throughout the investigation to hopefully settle throughout. That may be the case and that may not. And so if we then finish the investigation, it's either we find reasonable cause for a discriminatory act or no reasonable cause for a discriminatory act. If we find no reasonable cause, basically write the letter, it's a closure at that point because we have not found. They can appeal, however, we necessarily don't have the platform for appeals right now. Regarding a cause case, we are, not regarded, but we have to enforce at that point and proceed to post-cause activity, which may mean conciliating, trying to settle, say, hey, now you're found guilty, pretty much, in this space. Let's have another conversation now and see where you want to go from here. If people, and with the conciliations in our agreements, we're mandated to have public interests included in those conciliation agreements, which I think is the best thing ever in life. And that's why I push conciliation, because right now, I'm going to give an actual example. Criminal records. Criminal records provide disparate treatment to particular groups and when they review these criminal records. I had a gentleman, he had a past criminal record regarding more so drug violations and things like that. The last time he did something was 17 years ago on his record, and he got it denied for housing. That was a whole problem for me, okay? So with that being said, and Well, Michelle actually works in the office, and she was there that this week, he actually came in and signed his agreement. And with that being said, they're going to reevaluate the policy and their look-back period. So that's going to substantially help everybody else following him to be able to be approved or not when it comes to criminal records. So, and he came in there, and that was the best thing yesterday with the gratitude that was coming outside of this gentleman was wonderful. And that's, I guess, when you talk about helping people and things like that, that's what we really do the work for, generally, to get the resolution for the betterment of the people. And so generally, so in that case, there was a conciliation, there were policies in place that are gonna assist the future, and we monitor them. So we can call in, we could pop up, we could whatever, and ask, hey, have you had any complaints lately? What's going on? Da-da-da-da-da. Take a tour of the actual property to see if things look legit or not, depending on what the issue was. So we have that enforcement teeth with that conciliation agreement, and then it also appeases a lot of other areas. Outside of that, if the agreement never happens, you fine for cause, then it goes to we go to litigation, we go to court.
One of the things that I think is a real benefit to the public is that, first of all these services are free of charge, correct?
100%.
Whether you file with the City of Tampa, Florida Commission, or EEOC. The complainants, I believe, are not required to have an attorney.
No.
And so there's really no reason not to file a complaint if you believe you've been the victim of job discrimination. And all these different levels of protection. I wanted to ask one question and then go to Mr. Bastian. You mentioned coming to the office. So where is the office? What are the office hours?
Okay.
I wanted to talk about that office just a minute because I visited the building for the first time a couple of weeks ago. You're in a beautiful facility, so let's let people know where it is.
Okay, we are off of Hannah. There's a new city center that was built off of Hannah in East Tampa. And it's a beautiful venue, multi-million-dollar. I'm sure if you've read the newspapers, you know about it. And yes, so based off of the storefront type situation that the office had been in, and actually it had been kind of recessed at one point. Now we're pretty much in the best space we could have in that location. And you're more than welcome. The office hours are basically from 8:30 till 4:30. We're there sometimes a little later than that, but I would say 100% you're going to get someone from 8:30 to 4:30. You could call in, you can email. It is, I don't know that,
Well, you've got brochures back there.
Yes, the brochures are located in the back. They're associated with housing and employment. And don't forget to check out the picture of Mr. Hearns back there. But yes, thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Bastian, we're
Yes.
getting into your area now. We're talking about outreach and education.
times.
So how do you make sure that people know about these services, and how do you work with the community in your position?
Well, you have to get out and see, talk to people, visit community centers, go to libraries. You almost have to have a marketing strategy when it comes to outreach and education. For me, my goal is to educate everyone about the laws that we enforce. And you'd be surprised, a lot of times when I talk to people, they're like, hey, we didn't even know you guys existed. So then I give them just a brief overview of what we do, the laws we enforce, and how we're there to protect their rights in the work environment. You know, one of the things that I find fascinating when it comes to EEOC, that it not only applies to employees, but it also applies to applicants as well. So applicants that feel that they've been discriminated upon when it comes to the employment. But I think for me, just getting to know people, I attended an event a couple of weeks ago. It was the Haitian Flag Day, and it was probably one of the most satisfying events that I've been to. I got there, and it was just a great event, a lot of great people that I met there, and they were just so welcoming and thanked me for being there. They thanked us for what we do, and they thanked us for just helping them just be better as a community, right? And I got a chance to talk to several people there, and they kind of explained to me some of their cases. And of course, I referred them to our website because to me, it's probably one of the most user-friendly websites that I've seen, where you have, it defines everything. It gives you point of contacts. It gives you, just everything that you need to know about our agency. But for us, especially for me in our office, I noticed that when it comes to outreach, we're pretty much at every single event that we need to be when it comes to the Tampa community. Not just in Tampa, but also in the state of Florida. So just earlier today, I was in Sarasota doing an event there, and beautiful city, by the way. And then I got a chance to come up here and do this. So we're all over the place just to get the word out.
I believe now, because of the COVID-19 situation, I don't think you're taking walk-ins now. Folk are calling in now.
We're mostly, we will take walk-ins, but they're not guaranteed to be seen. You can walk into our office, and we'll help you get scheduled for an interview, because we're already pre-scheduled interviews already. If you do have a walk-in and the statute of limitations is today, we will go ahead and make room, and one of us will see you. But for the most part, we do like people to use our website. It is very user-friendly. We do take walk-ins, we take video appointments, we take phone appointments. So we've got it all set up now, very digital-friendly for that.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but we also have it now in over 90 languages.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very high tech.
Yeah.
Well, we are in this country, certainly privileged, I think, to have so many levels of protection for job discrimination. And as was just said, even applicants for jobs have protection. So you don't even have to have worked there one day. But if you feel that in the application process, you were discriminated against. And I think that's one of the key things about these cases. It's based on how the person, the complainant, feels about the way that they were treated. I don't think you have to have any proof when you file a complaint. Am I right about that?
You're
Did you
right.
comment?
Yep, you're right.
Not at the complaint portion.
Yeah.
Right,
And you're right, applicants, we are seeing a lot of disability discrimination with applicants at this point. So, that's a big, we are investigating quite a few of those. The other law that was just enacted, the Pregnancy Workers Fairness Act, was just enacted in 2023, and then the last law was just, they have a public forum where they have to have the, questions and all that kind of stuff. And it was, it'll, just in April of this 2024. And so it's you can't be discriminated against based on any condition related to your pregnancy before, after, or during. So it is a pretty encompassing law for all pregnancy related conditions. So, and that's the newest act that was just passed, and it is part of Title VII. Actually, it is related to Title VII because of the disability portion. So, but it is its own act.
Let me ask both EEOC and the City of Tampa if there are any cases that stand out in your mind, and maybe one that was most frustrating because maybe you felt like that person really had been the victim of discrimination, but the evidence just wasn't there, or the witnesses just didn't support what the complainant was saying, or there was something about it, and maybe one that you felt really good about, that justice really was done. You really did provide a service that otherwise this person may not have had. So do any cases stand out in your mind that you'd like to comment on now?
Nothing that's been closed.
Okay. Okay.
We've got some that are still active right now that I probably, that I won't comment on, but there are some pretty good cases out there right now. And I know that we've got historical cases that I wish they could come to my mind right now, but that are pretty significant and actually changed the laws. So.
I think for me, there was a age discrimination case. It didn't happen in the state of Florida. It happened in a different state where you had an amusement park discriminating against employees over 40 years old. Basically, employees that were, I want to say it might have been 30 or younger, but they would get housing. They were afforded housing during the summer months provided by the employer, but employees over 40 were not afforded those same opportunities. So I think that case right there kind of made sure that equality and justice was made for people that are 40 and over.
Ms. Candelaria, any city cases, whether they're open or closed, and without giving names of complainants or respondents?
The work that our office does is a great work. I will say that, and in that I believe that the ones that we can actually, we do our due diligence, that if it looks a little fishy, we're gonna find out where that fish is, you know? The one I spoke about most recently, I think, is pretty good in that I am getting a larger fair housing provider to actually reconsider who they hire, and they're a heavy hitter within the city of Tampa as far as the contractors to manage their properties. So with that, you've got a portfolio of at least 50 properties. Now, because of this criminal records and this particular conciliation agreement, all of your contractors are going to have to abide by the rule that you hold yourselves, but they're imposing a more stringent rule. So that to me is, we're affecting the greater good, and that's the most recent one. And I like the fact that it's going to affect so many more people in that.
I will say that we do a lot of policy procedure changes in our conciliation agreements. And that is very satisfying, because you've got some employers out there who, they never had American with Disabilities, policy. They never had anything that dealt with disabilities in the workplace, or they never had anything that dealt with, accommodations. Because you can still do the job as long as you're provided an accommodation in most cases. So, we do pride ourselves on, if we identify that in one of our cases, that is in our agreement when they do the conciliation. So.
And let me bring up one other area while we still have a few more minutes. I'm a dinosaur, I admit it, because when I worked for the city of Tampa, I never dreamed that there would be protection for persons based on sexual orientation.
Or gender
I never
identity.
thought that would happen.
Gender identity and sexual orientation.
So tell me about some of the cases you've had that come to your mind. And
We have, I
Yeah.
got a big one, actually. So there were a group of individuals that went to a private university here and went to a local area of bars and were denied entry into a restroom because they were men dressed in women's clothing and were not allowed to use the appropriate restroom, and were even coaxed and told or asked to pick up their dress. So, with that being said, they filed a complaint. There was cause to be found. They had argued that they didn't want to settle, and ultimately, a cause finding was issued. There were 3 individuals involved in that, but the cause could only be substantially given to the individual that was trying to enter the restroom, not
was
the
this public accommodations?
public accommodation.
Okay.
Correct. So with that being said, there was a settlement, and that large bar that many people know about did end up settling.
The other thing that is very effective, and I'm a witness because I've gone through mediation before, and
Right.
trust me, mediation, when done correctly, works. It really does. And the other thing that I'll say is that from personal experience, I worked for the city of Tampa for 32 and a half years, had a great job, never had a problem on my job. But in the area of fair housing, I know we're talking about EEOC, but I have filed 3 housing complaints in my lifetime.
Dang, sorry to
You
hear
know,
that.
and so what that says to me is that because I know my rights, because I'm, familiar with HUD and how housing discrimination works, and how to look for it, how to spot it, and what to do when you see it. But the average person doesn't really know what to do. And that's why it's so important to pick up the phone and call and just ask questions. You're not obligated to file a complaint when you pick up the phone. So someone comment in that area for me, for people who, I always felt like the number of cases, 20 years ago, the city of Tampa was investigating maybe 110 employment cases a year. I always believed there were probably 1,000 violations out there, and we maybe got 10% because most folk just don't think they have any recourse, but they need to call and ask and get
It's
information.
definitely the lack of knowledge, and
Yeah.
and for whatever reasons that, I mean, to this day, our office, oh, I didn't know they had that, just like the outreach and just like EEOC, and that the fact that these organizations, like EEOC has a regional office here in Tampa, this federal, and we're this municipality that have this office here for you all. So, going back to this, outreach and education is essential. So for instance, and I'll pull a plug right now, we have quarterly fair housing training that we conduct in the office at Hannah on a regular basis. Our next one is in July, what date? The 16th of July, and we go over different topics related to housing as far as education and outreach. We have leasing professionals, we have community members, we have owners, we have just a variety of people that come to these and are actually even required to, per the conciliation agreement, come to these trainings to be like, hey, they'll say, hey, yeah, we had fair housing training, yeah, da, da, da. Well, why are you here? Okay? We found that there's an issue, so apparently that fair housing training didn't work well. We're going to give you ours, okay? So that's something that we've implemented here locally, and that's fairly recently. And as far as our outreach and education, basically we had a big rush of that fairly recently, but within the last year. But I don't know that, we have to engage. We have to get plugged in. We got to go to the wash houses. We've got to go to those places where the individuals that don't necessarily receive the information because they're not reading the newspaper and they're not going to these other activities and stuff. It's not accessible to them. So we need to bring it to them, for them to be able to understand, I have an avenue, I have recourse, I can actually have my rights looked into or validated or whatever the case is. So I believe that the outreach and education, which has been a big push. So even with that right now, EEO and us have we're gonna do a partnership grant for St. Pete Pride. So we'll be working together, having tables and providing information to the people at the St. Pete Pride Festival on that Sunday together. There'll be more functions that we'll be incorporating with each other as well as individually. So we are choosing to and basically implored to actually conduct these outreach and education activities. And honestly, the 2 people that are here in the office, we love it. Like, that's one of the favorite things to do, is engage with the people and share the information, so.
Well, great. Well, we've got about 5 more minutes, and then we're going to take some Q&A. And I'd like to give you an opportunity, Ms. Schweiberger, to make any closing comments if you have any announcements you want to make from your office.
I was just going to comment on the calls that come in that people don't actually file, they just kind of want to test the waters. We get a lot of those. I just actually fielded one today. There's on our EEOC.gov website, I'm telling you, you can find everything. There's tabs that when you click the tab, it opens up, 10 other things you can click on. Lots of information in there, lots of contact information as well as general information about all the laws, about everything that we cover. And there is an 800 number on there. And that number rings into this call center. And then the call center people, they will, you know, send that out to whichever district is in that jurisdiction for that zip code, really. And I just got one, actually, it was yesterday or today from someone, and they were like, you know, I just want to kind of see if this falls under, you know, what you cover. And I'm like, okay, can you tell me what happened? And then she said, I bet she said it once, if she said it 10 times. I don't want to file. You're not taking my information, right? I don't want to do this.
People are hesitant.
Yeah, very
People are
hesitant.
fearful.
And I'm like, no, I promise, I'm not writing anything down, honestly. We were just having a conversation. So, you know, it is an education. It's something that, you know, we are always open to questions, to calls, to anything that you know, that you're concerned about. We've got some pamphlets back there that William brought that have our information in there, as well as our contact, our address, anything that you need. We've got somebody in our office 8 to 4:30 every day, Monday through Friday. I can't guarantee you'll get, like, be able to be seen by and do an investigation, but we will at least answer your questions and get you scheduled. And so that's what we really strive to do, is hopefully be there for you to answer your questions. Anything that you have a question about, please don't hesitate. We're here.
Thank you. And Ms. Candelaria, any announcements, anything you want to tell us that the city is doing special in the area of EEO work?
As of right now, it's just generally investigating, honestly, where we're pushing these cases out and addressing them fairly. However, the trainings that we do, that I would try to, like, announce, and that we have the one in July, and I believe one in September as well. October. So we have one in October as well. And subsequent to that, it would be, like, more than likely in February. We're gonna, the holidays, but I don't know about January. We might have to move that. Yeah, it's the holidays.
Don't get too far out.
Yeah, the November, Decembers, I don't know. But, and I think that's really it as far as activities. We will be at the St. Pete Pride as far as outreach is concerned. We don't necessarily have any other activities within this month that I know of. That Nat has been here all day.
If you guys belong to any organizations that you would like us to come to,
There you go.
we
Beautiful,
would be happy to.
Tammy.
Yeah.
Good job.
So let
Yes.
us know.
If you have a housing association, employment, a specific employer, someone who is an entrepreneur that is starting to employ people, hey, come through. We'll educate you so you don't have to see us on the other side.
Or if you belong to a group, like we just went to the Haitian flag group.
Community.
You know, any community group that you belong to that you just want more information, we'll be happy to come out.
Well, that's a great offer, and I certainly hope that those of you who are here with us in person, as well as watching online and who see this afterwards, will take them up on the offer. Again, you're free to call and get information. You're not obligated to file a complaint. But anyone who believes that they have been the victim of discrimination within the city limits of Tampa, if that employer is located within the city limits, then they would be under the city ordinance. And I think, is it 5 or more employees?
Look at you.
Well, I remember that from 20 years ago. So that hasn't changed. Still 5 or more employees.
Yes, sir.
With us, it's 15.
15
So
or
that's the
more
gap.
Federal
with
is
the
15.
feds.
And so that's good to know as
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
right? Where do you go? So
Yeah.
federally, 15 and up, bigger employers, bigger offices.
Yeah.
Because you're in Tampa, we cover the smaller group, but it has to be.
5 or more.
Hey.
5 or more.
And really quick, one of the things that our organization, what I like that we're doing is that we try to, you know, with this new generation, they're on social media, they're on Facebook, they're on Twitter, but we try to make sure that we target and we educate that generation through social media, through Facebook, Twitter. We have videos on YouTube. When you want questions on how to file a charge, when you have questions on outreach or education on what we do, you can go to YouTube and look it up, right? We do listening sessions. Listening sessions, we've done one with ING this year, the Islamic Network Group, and this is how we make changes to our policies, by listening to community members, so they can tell us what changes they would like to see to better help them. We also do in-person seminars. We actually have an event coming up on the 9th of July in Orlando, Florida. So we're doing a lot to get the word out to the public, so that way you all know, how to reach us.
Well, let's give our panel a big hand of applause for their participation. We're now going to go to the Q&A portion of the program. For our audience here in Tico Hall, we remind you, please wait for the microphone. If you have a question, raise your hand and wait for the microphone before you ask the question. And for those of you who are on Zoom, please use the Q&A feature on the Zoom webinar app to submit your questions during the presentation. So if you have a question, please raise your hand and wait for the microphone. Right up here.
Thank you. You actually answered my question with the 5 and the 15, but I have an example. Small business that is, let's say, 5 employees, but the business itself really isn't equipped for maybe a disability, maybe wheelchair access or whatever. And a disabled person does apply for that job, and maybe somebody with less experience or education is hired instead of that person. Would that be a legitimate complaint, even though the business itself felt that they could not accommodate a disabled person because it's a small business as opposed to a large business?
Great question. Who wants to take that?
That's a slippery slope.
I would.
Yeah, I think you have to look at the reasons for the hire. That would be where the evidence would come in. Who did you hire? Were they more qualified? Were they not? So you kind of have to look at the whole piece of it.
We also look at, we have something called undue hardship. And
That is the prime thing right there.
Yeah, and with undue hardship, we have to find reasonable cause why it would be some sort of monetary constraint to the organization, why they can't provide the reasonable accommodation.
And that word reasonable is key. So.
It's very law associated in that way, reasonableness and what is considered reasonableness. So depending on the issue, certain things could be reasonable to a certain scope where they wouldn't be for something else, or a different type of work task, or things of that nature. So holistically, that's why I say it's a slippery slope, depending on the tasks that would be needed. It's like, I think that this wouldn't work out because of their disability, but you never know. Persons with disabilities, they maneuver, they manage, they do things that most people would never realize that they had the capacity to do with whatever loss of limb or whatever the case is, or bodily thing. So it's hard to say that, I would refer to someone, or if I were that employer, I would ask an attorney. I would ask somebody that has experience in that area based off of the role that we're requiring and the need of the person. Does this seem reasonable or not?
Great question. Yes, we have another. Yes.
So when I was a junior in high school, living in Montgomery, Alabama, when the Civil Rights Bill was being, and President Kennedy was going around campaigning for the Civil Rights Bill, and our governor in Alabama, George Wallace, was campaigning against it, and in those days, finally it got through. I mean, it took the death of the president, frankly, for that to get through, but it happened. And I know what the circumstances were at that point. I can't even imagine what it would have been like to work in one of those offices that you work in now in those days, because it was a brand new thing. And I mean, it was so, when they announced over the intercom in my high school that the president had been killed, everybody in the class except for me cheered. I mean, those were the days, and we've come a long ways, maybe, I don't know, depends on who you talk to, I guess, but my point is that the question I'm really getting at is there must have been an arc over those 60 years of the types of cases and the resistance to settlement. And I'm just curious to hear from this panel of people that are working in the field now about what that arc is. You know, I mean, I'm so glad that this all happened. When I took my 96-year-old mother to the casino, and she was able to wheel her wheelchair into the bathroom
American
because of the
Disabilities
fact that the
Act.
walls were big enough for her to get into the stall. The truth is that the president back then died so that my mother could get into that stall. You know, and who would have ever guessed, 60 years ago, that was going to be one of the benefits of that law. But, and I'm sure that the nature of the cases has changed. And so I'm just curious to hear from the panel about how you guys see the nature of those cases and the resistance to them and how that's gone over this long 60 years. Thank you.
Anybody?
That's broad.
I mean, I did a lot of reading before I came here so that I could address some of those issues. And when they passed the law in 1964, when they passed the Civil Rights Act, it took a year after that before really it got into place. You know, the people got into place. They decided there was going to be a commission, a five-person commission, which, you know, they had to have it divided against party lines. You couldn't have everybody from the same party. Had to be, you know, 2 and 3 or 3 and 2. And so, you know, they put a lot of thought into that. And then, you know, it was an appointed position of the chair, which it still is to this day. The chair is an appointed position of the commission. But they didn't, the way the act was put into place originally, they did not have enforcement provisions in there. So when it was first enacted, they didn't allow the commission to enforce the laws. So that took some time to get that amended into the law. So there was a lot of growing pains. You know, and like I said, even just as recently as last year, it's still being amended. You know, there's still being changes to it. So there's a lot of changes. There's a lot of, like you said, there's probably, back in the very first cases that they saw, I'm sure were very different. But at the same token, I bet you're seeing some of the same things today. You know, it's just, they originally thought they were only going to have a few hundred cases. In that first year, I think it ended up being, I don't know, 1,500 the first year. So it was much more than what they thought. And now, you know, we have what we call an EEO-1 report, which is about all employers and you know, how many employees they have that are of different races that are, because I don't know if you guys, when you know, have to do a survey or whatever, you have to say, what's your race, what's your sex, and then you have the ability to not say, but they collect that data and they report on that data. So they try and make sure that employers are diverse in their hiring and their employees. So it's growing and it's evolving all the time, but there are still a lot of, you know, alleged discriminations, a lot.
We've got time for maybe one more question. And Amanda?
Yeah, we have a question from our online audience. How does the state of Florida's restrictions on teaching of history regarding racism and LGBTQ issues affect civil rights?
Unfortunately, that's not the space that I work in, so I can't really play to that. I have my own personal feelings about that, very big feelings about that. However, I mean, structurally, institutionalizing it, right? So basically, we're hiding from a truth. That's my position, that, you know, the book bans, the things of that nature, go back historically, look to whom was initiating those and what the result they were trying to get out of implementing those types of things.
20 years ago, again, I can speak for 20 years ago, in the city of Tampa, while we enforced, we actually, the city of Tampa, I keep saying we, I don't work for the city anymore, but
You're still us.
the city of Tampa
His picture's
enforced,
back there again, remember?
had what we call voluntary compliance.
Voluntary.
Which, you know, voluntary compliance. The two words don't go together, right?
No.
But because we didn't have an ordinance. And we didn't, at one time, we didn't have a contract with the EEOC, the city didn't, or with HUD. But the city did investigations, and we would write up reports and recommendations, and we actually did some conciliation. We were actually able to resolve some issues without an ordinance. I mean, that was before we had any real teeth. But we had a category, I don't know if it exists anymore, of other. So we would investigate anything anybody filed, even in the area of employment or education, rather. And we had some success stories without having any real teeth. I remember this, and I'll just end with this story because I think we're getting near the end of the evening, but in the early days of the city of Tampa having an Office of Human Rights, when we began looking at discrimination all over the city in whatever category it might fall in, the only thing that the city of Tampa had that really got employers' attention and public accommodations folk attention was the fact that on our letterhead we had the names of some very prominent local people. And so when folks saw the name of, say, Cody Fowler, for example, then they would respond and they would work with us and try to, do as much as they could to resolve situations. But so that is an area that is not covered by Title VII or the city ordinance, the question that came up, but it certainly is something that someone should address, right? And so that's where partners come in. That's where Mr. Bastian's job comes in, because he networks with different people in different fields, and there's probably someone somewhere who can address that concern, because it's a legitimate concern. But when you work within the confines of an ordinance or federal law, that's what you do, and beyond that, you can try to refer people to folk who can address their concerns. So we are at the end of an evening. We certainly have learned a lot. I know I have. I hope you have too. One more hand of applause, please, for our audience, for our panel. And this has been another Florida Conversation. We invite you to visit the Tampa Bay History Center website and see all of the wonderful things that we're involved in this summer and beyond. Take care and have a safe drive home. Thank you very much for coming.